Hello everyone. Dr. Geeta Bansal is going to give a presentation on the G-11 program first, and there will be a Q&A session after the presentation, so please hold your questions until then. Please stay muted at all times, and when we start the Q&A session, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'm going to call your name according to the order. And after your question is answered, please remember to lower your hand and also to put your question in the chat, so we have a record of all the questions that were asked. If you have any questions, just please feel free to send me a message in the chat. Thanks, and I think we can get started with the presentation.
And you're starting the recording?
It has already started.
Oh, it has already started. Yeah. Okay. Let me put this. Okay. You see it now? So hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. This is the second of two pre-application webinars that we have conducted so far. The first one was in April. I don't know if any of you attended that. This is going to be very similar, except that there may be different people asking different questions. What we hope to do is to capture this in a live recording and make it be available to you. Jane is trying to work out with our communications office as to whether we can share this right away via email or it needs to be posted somewhere, but very soon, before this week ends, we'll definitely try to share it with you today, tomorrow, or by Friday. I think it's important you have the set of slides since you won't be able to take all the notes you want, but I want to make this really interactive. I know that it's been a frustrating exercise for some of you, not because of the grantsmanship itself, but also because of our funding. We don't have a whole lot of money, so when we do end up awarding, it's really going to the ones that were really scored well. And one of the things I want to do by way of this webinar and also from what I heard last time is also to get your input as to what you see as the need, what you see as the problems that have thwarted your being able to get awarded. I want to be able to ask you all those questions. I want to be able to get all your inputs on all of those issues so that we can make it better for the next round. When I say we can make it better for the next round, you know that this is the last one for this year. I'm sorry, there's going to be one more, I believe. But we will be re-competing these or renewing these very soon so that this program can continue and help you. But we first want to make sure that it is going to be useful. It is going to result in some good grants. So that's why I'm conducting this now. I know it's a little too late, but nothing is ever too late. So I want to now start the presentation that is just going to cover mostly what the NOFO is about, the application process, the review process, anything that you need to know to be able to write a good grant. And then let's wait for the questions towards the end. So write it down or put it in the chat so that my continuity doesn't get disturbed. I just want to be able to go through the whole thing. And so, as you all know, this is the G-11 program. We call it the G-11 program, but actually the program is called an Extramural Associates Research Development Award, which all it is to say that it's a mechanism that was initiated a while ago. And we call it the G-11 program. We call it the ERDA program, but we also call it mostly what we like to term it as is the Infrastructure Development Award Program. Okay, so that is what this is. The title here is Infrastructure Development Training Program for Critical HIV Research in Low and Middle Income Country Institutions. the G-11 clinical trials not allowed. So as you know, since this is a training program, we don't obviously allow clinical trials. But one thing that I wanted you to note was this critical HIV research in low and middle income country institutions. This HIV research term in there has been a little bit of a problem for both you all from the PI community and also for us. And I'll explain to you how that came about and what it really means. Next slide. So, okay. So this program was begun as an extramural associates program. This was a long time ago. It was called the EAP program. It was begun in the 1970s, late 1970s. It was begun by the NIH to be able to help those institutions and those PIs that generally did not have a competitive environment in which to apply for and understand what it was to hold research grants. What did you have to do? What did the institute need to, what did the institute need to have to be able to provide that infrastructure for those institutions that wanted to develop a research administration office initially. That's how it began. So NIH, through the Office of the Director, that's what the means there, announced an initiative directed at scientific faculty and academic science administrators. I'm taking some time to read through these words because I want to make sure that you understood. So it was to help those institutions with significant underrepresentation in research. So there were a lot of minority institutions. There were a lot of institutions that were catering only to minority students, but they did not have that research infrastructure. And to be able to do that, NIHOD decided that they would then take it upon themselves to select some of these minority institutions, select some of these women's colleges that were not being given proper representation or not being given the opportunities to then bring them to the NIH to learn what grants were all about, how do you go about getting grants, etc. So this whole thing that you're going to learn or you already know and you want to apply for another grant for was something that was done as a selection. So when we realized that there were some institutions that needed it, there was an understanding with those institutions and the US government to select them, to bring them to the NIH to learn the ropes in terms of grants administration. That's how it began. And then over the years, from 1978 onwards, over the years, NICHD was then entrusted with overseeing this program, but then they did it through a grant mechanism. So then it became a competitive grant mechanism, which is called the IRDA mechanism. And that's when the G-11 mechanism was coined. So the IRDA is really associated with the mechanism. The program is one thing, Extramural Associates Research Development Award, that's what it's called, or the infrastructure to develop infrastructure. But the mechanism that we are using is called the G-11. Just make sure that you understand the difference. It's just a mechanism. It's just like an R01 or an R21 or something like that. So loosely, yes, we call it the G-11 program, and I think we all understand it, but I wanted you to know the difference. So before I get there, I pointed out to you the HIV, critical HIV research in the title, right? So how did this all come about? Let me go back for a second. So when we when this program was evolving, Fogarty International Center realized that we needed to do something similar in low and middle income countries because a lot of those countries did not have that research infrastructure in those days, in those early days when grants were just beginning to be awarded to these to LMIC institutions. So they collaborated with the NICHD programs and were able to get a few grants awarded. Again, it was not managed by Fogarty, but through the NICHD and the NIHOD. So a few countries outside of the US did get some awards, but somehow over the years, again, things have evolved to various different ways of doing this. And so in 2012, Fogarty decided that it's time for us to have our own program, because we also wanted to expand from just research administration to other areas that we considered was the infrastructure needed to conduct good research. So you would have many different areas, and it'll come up on one of the slides, and you've probably already seen it in the FOAs, that there are many infrastructures, not just about getting a research administration office, but you have human subjects research, ethical reviews of human subjects research, etc. So there are many different things that you needed. So that was where Fogarty decided in 2012 to start their own program. So sorry about that. What is happening? Okay, so I was here, and so when we started that, when we wanted to go and start this program in 2012, we relied on the funds, the availability of funds. And in those days, in the 1980s, we had more funds in the HIV programs because that was how the whole situation was then. Fogarty had a lot of HIV money because HIV/AIDS has just about started, and we wanted to start working on that. So we started awarding research grants in HIV, and it was done under a different program. Those days, they were called the ATRIP. I think some of you may know the ATRIP program, the ICORTA TB program. These were the main training programs that were available those days, and they were all related to HIV. So when we had so much money in HIV and we were awarding these research grants, it was recognized that there wasn't a lot of help in terms of the infrastructure to accept these awards, to be able to first of all, write the grants, accept the awards, manage the awards, etc. And that's how we decided that we need to have an infrastructure development program through this G-11 mechanism to be able to help institutions that had a substantial amount of HIV research going on in those institutions, and provide them money to be able to then develop these various infrastructure programs. And why? And I think I already told you why, because HIV money was available. So we were able to get the Office of AIDS Research, which is the office that allocates the HIV money, the HIV research dollars to the various ICs at the NIH. And so we always have to, anytime we spend HIV money, we have to get approval from the Office of AIDS Research that this is still a high priority area that is going to serve the HIV research community, et cetera. And so that's how this whole thing began. It's artificial. It was because of the money that was available that we had to say that there should be HIV research going on, or the FOA right now, your NOFO says that the PI should have some HIV experience, et cetera. And we'll go through all of those things. Ask me questions at that point. It's confusing. So that's how it began. And so here are the three different HIV programs that we had that came up also around the same time as the G-11 in 2012. Before that, it was the ATRIP, the ICORTA, those were merged. And then we developed what is now called the HIV-RT program, the HIV Research Training Program. So that training program is through a D43 mechanism. Okay, that's your traditional training program. Then the D71 program is a planning grant, so that it's a short-term planning grant that then allows the PIs to write the D43. The third one is the one that we're going to be talking about now. They kind of go hand in hand because, like I explained to you, the way it evolved. was to help the HIV research community get that infrastructure, ability to develop the infrastructure to be able to conduct high-level HIV research. So that's how it began. So this G-11 program, there are some restrictions in terms of the eligibility, et cetera, which we'll go over. I don't think what's written there about the LMIC eligibility, et cetera, really for the D71 and D43, you don't have to worry about it. Let's just go over the G11 program. So as I said, this Infrastructure Development Award, or the Extramural Associates Research Development Award, ERDA program, uses the G11 mechanism. This program goals was to provide support for successful grant activities. So if you have a grant, you need to know how to spend the money. You need to know what is allowed and what's not allowed. So those are the kinds of things that this program is supposed to help support. So what were some of the things there? Strengthen the scientific capacity of the LMIC institutions by enhancing the functional resources required to conduct that research. And the key word here is the functional resources. So it's not about just getting a grant and it's not like just any grant. This grant has to help the research community working in the HIV/AIDS area in the institutions and help them with the functional resources needed to conduct that research. And I continue to say HIV right now because that's the way the FOA is designed. But actually, if you can think about it, there are certain areas such as research administration, such as bioethics, such as any kind of instrumentation facility. These are all things that can spill over to all the other research areas, right? But because we are spending HIV money, we want to make sure that the institutions have a sufficient amount of HIV research going on there. That doesn't mean that the others cannot avail of it. So once you develop that infrastructure, it should be available to everybody at the institution. I think that is the key. This is an institutional grant. The second thing was it's a collaborative application from both the US and the LMIC institutions to develop that training program. And this training program is not the same as the D43 training program, which is able to give degrees, which is able to train postdocs, PhD students, get them their doctoral degrees, etc. This is not like that. This is a training program to build the capability in the human capital that you have at the institutions, who can then help the research environment, help the other investigators, and so on. So it's really a training program, again, for people, for personnel, to be able to get trained in those specific functions that the institution deems is needed, that they don't have a sufficient resources, and or they don't have sufficiently well-trained people. So it's meant for that sort of for that activity. So it's a collaboration between the US and the LMICs. The US is putting in the money, therefore we want it to be a collaboration. However, it has now gone to a point where many LMIC institutions, having taken advantage of this or having learned on their own how to set up research administration offices, can help another LMIC institution. An LMIC institution that's well-trained can help another LMIC institution that is not yet up there in terms of the help that they or support that they wanted or needed. They can help. So it could be an LMIC collaboration too. So the kinds of support that you need is technical, administrative, and financial management of those grants. All of these expertises are required for managing a grant. And so these are the kinds of infrastructure that we would like to develop. So financial is, somebody who knows how to do budgets and can teach the research community on the budget aspects, management aspects. There are other things in terms of the infrastructure that would deal with the actual functions that you need. Like I said, it could be biostatistics. It could be to develop a library that will teach the trainees or the research personnel on how to do literature searches or be able to provide them with literature searches, et cetera. So there's a whole lot of different things in there. So the proposed training for functional enhancement of the resource needs is to support the institution's research community, and it is not for individual programs. So that's the other third key thing that you should remember, is that whatever you do, if you do apply for this grant, you're awarded one, you are developing it for the institution. Therefore, you need to have this training be done in such a way that the people that do get trained stay on at the institution and they're able to offer it to the rest of the institution. At that point, it doesn't have to be only HIV researchers. This has nothing to do with an HIV researcher per se. But since the funding is coming from there, the institution just needs to say, we have a lot of HIV researchers and we would like to use this money to benefit them. But remember that everybody gets benefited. So that's one thing that I think I'm going to keep coming back to, because many people have been sort of taken aside or led astray by thinking that they are not HIV researchers or they don't have HIV research going on, et cetera. So remember that part. So then how do you begin to apply, right? What do you need to do to think of writing up a good grant G-11 grant application or the infrastructure grant that is important for you all? So the first thing you have to do is to identify the infrastructure needs of your institution. What sort of infrastructure needs are identified to enhance the research-related activities at your institution? So everybody can immediately say research administration. We need to know pre-award what we have to do. How do you make budgets? What can we ask for? What can we not ask for, et cetera? How much should we allocate to this activity versus that activity, et cetera? So that's all pre-award. And then once you get the grant, if you're lucky, then how do you manage it? How can you spend that money? On what can you spend the money? Can you just go buy instruments because you need it? It all depends, what that instrumentation is about. Can you build a lab? No, you cannot build a lab because that money is not meant for that. It is meant to be training the personnel to be able to fulfill a certain support function. So there are those sorts of things. Those are called post-award management. That you need to identify what you need. Maybe you need a lab facility. Maybe you need a centralized facility with who will do PCR and analysis for everybody, or a flow cytometer facility that would serve many different researchers, not just the HIV ones, but many different researchers. Maybe you need a biostatistics group because everybody needs biostatistics. You need biostatistics if you're conducting clinical trials. You need biostatistics if you're just doing lab work, animal studies, just plain human subject studies. You always need that. So you can use this mechanism to set up that infrastructure for the whole institution by through this mechanism. So those are some of the functional aspects that you can think of. So identify what you need. You cannot come back, two different PIs working at the same institution cannot come back and say, oh, I'm going to write a G-11 for research administration skills development. Because we'll say, why? You are both at the same institution. Why do you need two? We're not going to give it to you because this is meant for the institution. So one of you applies to this and make sure that the institution has bought in, and you're going to be able to then those trained personnel through this grant mechanism are there to serve everybody else. So that's the second point there, that you describe the support that is needed, and then you let us know, or you let the reviewers know through your grant, is what sort of an impact will it have on the LMIC institution. So if you develop this infrastructure, how is it going to help the institution? What are some of the main impact that this is going to have. Obviously, if you have a good research administration office, you're going to be able to submit more grants because somebody knows exactly how to do these things. You're going to be able to hopefully get awarded more grants, so the institution's grant portfolio increases. So those are some of the things to be thinking about. Proposed plans for sustainment and outreach. So I think told you that if you had an institution that is already well versed in these sorts of things, maybe it's time for them to write along with another institution that needs that kind of support to be able to give them that training and share their knowledge. So it's all of those things. And when I say that this needs to be focused on the institutional infrastructure development, that doesn't mean that a particular program cannot benefit. But if you do benefit, you cannot just have it for your own particular program. Let's say you're a D43 PI and you realize that you need someone to manage your grants well, but you don't have a person and that is well trained. You get this grant and you train them, but then you're doing it only for your program, which is only doing it for your training program, the D43s or whatever those may be. The institution isn't benefiting. So what needs to be done is how you will share this. You got the grant, but the grant, I know, and as most NIH grants or most US government grants are, they go to the institution. So the institution needs to be involved. You need to get buy-in from the administrators, like the dean. I think there's a dean here who probably now understands why it's important that the buy-in needs to come from the institution so that there would be that support. If you need extra support, if you need something for sustainability, it needs to come from them. After this grant is done, what then? We're not going to let it die, right? So that's what I mean by saying you need to make sure that the institution is going to be helped by this, even if you are a PI, a scientific PI writing this grant. And then you have to think about, do you have the time to manage this grant? Because if you're a scientist, you're not going to think about the administration unless you are one of those invested in building it. And I think at the level of the deans and the vice chancellors, they're all invested in trying to develop that facility for their institution. So maybe they will be, in spite of being scientists, they know how to get others to work on this and continue to develop that infrastructure. And on this other side, it's taken straight from the FOA, all of the different research areas which we came up with. We thought these would be important, just talking to a few people. And a lot of these things the numbers have increased over the years because every year I thought of something, would put it in there. So these are some of the areas we put in there that we would say this grant mechanism is suited to build that infrastructure. However, at the end, if you see right there at the bottom, it says other areas with appropriate justification. Maybe we didn't think of everything. Maybe you have certain other needs that we couldn't think of, but you have. But if you're able to come up with those ideas and put in an appropriate justification for that, those are also eligible for application. And then all these areas that are listed here, you don't have to do all of them, okay? You just pick, maybe you just need biostatistics or the information communication technology for research. That's all you need. Just focus on one of them. Don't mix up too many, because that would dilute, the training you do. It's a small grant, small amount of money, and so you don't want to put in too many things in there. And some of them maybe nobody will ever use, like a laboratory animal welfare oversight. Maybe, I don't see them in our HIV programs for animal studies. So maybe you'll never use them. So each of those things, don't have to do all of them. Pick one that you need. And this is where a question came up last time is, how many can you do per institution if you're applying for a G-11? Well, if you choose biostatistics as one and research administration as another, they are distinct, they are separate. And so maybe there are two different people that can apply for this, or a PI can apply for two different ones, but they have to be scientifically distinct, cannot be doing it for the same one. And you can ask me questions about this if I've confused you, but I think it's pretty clear. So the next thing is eligibility of the institution. So once you decide this is what you need, and these are the areas you want to work on, or this is the one area you want to develop that infrastructure, you then next need to go and think about, are you eligible to apply? You're eligible to apply for most NIH grants, but there are some for the Fogarty programs, we have certain, especially when it comes to training programs, we have certain criteria that you have to follow. So beginning in May of 2019, this sort of applies to the G-11 program, but it was discussed and it was put on our website. So I'm just going to read it out to you. So the upper middle income countries, UMICs, is upper middle income countries that are also, so remember, LMIC stands for low income countries, middle income countries. And then you have the low middle income countries and the upper middle income countries. So up until the low middle income countries, no questions, you can apply. But when it comes to the upper middle income countries who are also members of the G20 nations, you are not eligible to apply for training grants. And that's what happened in 2019. It started applying to the G-11 program also. And the reason this was done was around that time, it was decided that the upper middle income countries were quite well situated to handle their own infrastructure, that they have the funds available to be able to take care of those infrastructures, the training, etc. So even D43's training programs are all excluded if you are an upper middle income country also belonging to the G20 nations. So this is on the Fogarty website. And how do we define LMICs? And it's in the World Bank classification. This World Bank classification changes or gets updated every July. So some countries get in, some countries fall off, all of those things. So when you apply, make sure that you're still eligible. For the most part, you are. And the question came up, if you are an upper middle income country, and the exception was upper middle income countries, but those that are in sub-Saharan Africa were excluded from that. They can still apply, even if they're part of the G20 nations. Okay, so, let me let you digest that, and you can come back to it if you still have questions. All right, once that eligibility in terms of, who can apply gets decided, you want to then look at the eligibility of the individuals. So any PI, anybody can apply for an NIH grant if you can show that you have the requisite, credentials. So you have to be somebody who can work. If it is a scientific grant, you have the scientific expertise. In this case, you have to have the expertise needed to develop that infrastructure. So let's say it's a research administration, right? It doesn't have to be that you are a financial person or you are in the research administration office. A lot of the times it's the PIs that recognize that we need that in particular research infrastructure, but if they don't have the expertise in the sense that they don't know what is really needed. Let's take an HIV researcher because we're talking about the HIV environment here. So if this person is not an HIV researcher, and they want to develop an infrastructure to conduct a high-level HIV research, and they probably wouldn't really know unless they talk to some of the PIs that are working in the HIV field to know what is needed, what kind of a training is needed, who should be trained, etc. So they have to have some knowledge of the area that they are trying to develop that research infrastructure in. They may not be the ones doing it, but they should at least know what is needed and then be able to go get the right expertise, right team to be able to develop that infrastructure, right? So you have to have a PI that is has the required skills, knowledge, and resources needed for the purposes of training others to build that infrastructure. So it could be an established expert in the proposed research infrastructure function. So if, let's say, it's going to be to train somebody, I keep going back to research administration because that's one of the most outstanding ones that everybody talks about. is if they need that pre-award management, post-award management training, or learn how to do that, it needs to be a researcher who knows what those issues are. So that researcher then, because they have their own grants and they know what difficulties they had, so they know exactly what needs to be done. So you need to have somebody who has that knowledge. You need somebody who is capable of providing both administrative and professional leadership, right? So the professional leadership and also the administrative leadership is needed because somebody has to manage that grant. And they want to make sure that what the grant said it would do is being done. So they would need that. Or they could have a team member with whom they would converse. They can be the overall coordinator, but they would need somebody at that office, preferably somebody who has the expertise in the financial management of grants, who is in that office, who then can be involved with a PI, because not everybody can write grants. So it could be an established PI that can write it, but they need that collaboration with somebody who is actually going to do the work. The development and implementation of the proposed training, oh, sorry, I'm reading wrong. They have experience in supporting high priority HIV research. And I've already gone over ad nauseum about why HIV research. For the purposes of this round of this particular FOA, we are talking about that HIV research experience is good. So a question came up last time. Does the PI have to have an HIV research experience? Well, if it's a PI that knows research administration very well or biostatistics very well, but doesn't have the HIV experience, that's fine. They just have to get hold of a collaborator who has that missing expertise. And together, they will know then, oh, I have to develop a biostatistics infrastructure for HIV research, but I don't know anything about HIV, but my collaborator knows. So you apply for this as a multiple PI, so that both of them together will be able to decide what sort of biostatistics infrastructure needs to be built. You definitely want to include the HIV component there because, when you conduct HIV trials versus, let's say, cardiovascular disease trial, the statistics may be different. So you need some of those nuances. So that's why we need people who at least know the science. Hope you are noting down any questions, because I'm going to continue on. So now that we've talked about the eligibility of the PIs and the institutions, okay, so the next thing that the FOA goes through is the letters of intent. Many people send me letters of intent when they know they're going to do this exactly 1 month before, like the FOA says. The letters of intent are just letters letting the program officer know that you are planning to apply for a certain grant program. You're planning to apply for a certain initiative, right? Why are you letting me know that? You probably don't realize. You think that it is mandatory. You need to, if you don't send me that letter of intent, then you lost your chance. No need to worry about that. It is not mandatory, like the FOA says. If you're able to send it to us well in advance, even if before the 1 month deadline that is put into the FOA, it is going to help the NIH. So the Center for Scientific Review is the body, is the center that takes care of all peer reviews, right? Your applications go to the Center for Scientific Review referral office. They then assign it to the institutes. But then the review staff, they are called SROs. You all know probably what are SROs, the scientific review officers, who institute or convene the review panel, the peer review panel, and get your grants reviewed. It helps them to know who is applying. If you let them know these are the people that are applying and these are the people that are going to be collaborating with this particular grantee, it helps them to exclude those people from searching for in their search for reviewers, because anybody that is listed on a grant is going to be in conflict in a review panel. They're not going to be able to review. So by letting us know who are all going to be working with you, we let the CSR know so that they know that they should at least not, call on the people that are already listed. It also helps me know as a program officer whether you are eligible, whether you're doing it the right way, whether your thoughts are, in tune, in sync with what the FOA needs. So I'll look at the eligibility. I'll look at the country to see that it is, you haven't made a mistake. Things like that. So it helps me to know what's coming in, who's coming in, and what are they going to work on. Is it really going to be helpful for them to do something like this? Should it be modified a certain way? I'm able to give you that. But oftentimes I'm not able to, because all I get are names. If you would like to just say what the through a title, what infrastructure you want to develop, or write a short paragraph on what you're thinking of doing, that that will help me give you that extra bit of information if you want it. So that's why the LOIs are important, but they are not mandatory. So if you did not send one, don't panic and don't not apply for the actual submission date. Okay, go ahead and do it. So I want to make sure that nobody loses the chance just because you didn't send out the LOI. Yeah, I just told you, checking institutional eligibility, etc. That's what I do when I get that information. And sometimes I reply, say, noted, I got it. And if I have questions, I'll send it back to you. But sometimes I don't, because it looks like it's okay. But if you still want to know, you can always, remind me, and I'll give you an answer. So the peer review process. So when you write the grant application, it goes, like I said, to the Center for Scientific Review, and they review it. Oftentimes what we do, and this is where, there's a lot of confusion amongst the PIs, amongst the reviewers, and then I'm sitting here pulling out my hair thinking, what are they doing? This is fine, or this is not fine, etc. This is because, there are, a lot of ambiguities in the FOA, like you probably already know, or you haven't understood it, or we haven't communicated it properly. The FAQs were done at the time when the FOAs first went out, and when we don't get questions, and when we don't get a lot of concerns about the language in there, then you're kind of, you don't tend to go back and change things. But now I will. Now that I'm getting more questions, I know that I can do the FAQs, revamp those FAQs. So basically what happens is the applications, they will be evaluated for their scientific and technical merit by the CSR. The impact score, you know what the impact score is. The impact score is overall your grant, the infrastructure that you're trying to develop, and I'm just focusing on the infrastructure development grant. How is it going to help the institution? Is there going to be a sustainability plan in there? Is this just a one-time, the PI needed a grant, they got it, they've done something, and then it's going to end? It's that overall impact that the reviewers have been asked to look for. That's your overall impact score. That's what goes on your summary statement. And then you have each of the individual reviewers there are usually 3 that review your grant, and you get those individual critiques, which is the one that I always ask you all to look at your critiques. Tell me if you agree with it or not. If you don't agree with it, let me know why you don't agree with it. Did the reviewer miss something, etc.? That's why I make you go back and read your summary statement. Don't call me, and Jane does this very effectively. Don't call Dr. Bansal till you have received your summary statement, because I want you to go through that to see if you made a mistake, if you understood what they are saying, or if you agreed with them, then of course you revise and resubmit. So those are some of the reasons for looking at your summary statement. And in this particular grant, this is not like a training grant, even though we call it a training grant, right? This training grant is not like the D43, where you have a big, extensive, training program, the coursework and university accreditation, et cetera, et cetera. This is a training that is going to be a very small training to equip the people who are going to help, and to actually help the functional resources that an institution needs to conduct good HIV research, or good research. So this training is a little different. And therefore, it is going, the way it is structured is just like any other research grant. The significance, the investigator, the environment, the approach, innovation, et cetera. Those are the 5 criteria. So it's written more like that. So in terms of the significance, I already kind of told you, find out why you need that what infrastructure do you need that you don't have? Why is it important? The significance kind of captures all those things, a rationale for selection of that particular infrastructure that you need to develop for your institution. That is the significant, okay? The investigators, and I already explained to you there, they need to have expertise in that infrastructure support function. If they don't have everything by themselves, they have a collaborator, they have a multiple PI set up where together the team is able to then say, we have the required expertise to get this work done. So that's about the investigators. Innovation is the third area. And I think we still are going to be using the same criteria that have been applied so far, but next year in January, the whole thing will change and you'll get, I'll probably be sending out information to you all how the review criteria are going to change. But the way you write it still doesn't change. You still have to write about the significance, the innovation, the approach, et cetera, but the way they're going to review it would be, bundling certain criteria together. And you learn about that later on when I send out the information to you. So in terms of the innovation, the training models and the innovative strategies that you would use, you may not be able to, how much innovation can you have, if you're developing biostatistics, training for biostatisticians to help everybody. They all need to know the basics. So there may not be any, but the innovation here could be in terms of how you are going to maintain that, how you're going to be instigating or empowering or exciting these trainees to say, oh, I'm really performing a great service to my institution. I want to have a job here and I want to continue to help in this research infrastructure that is needed for the other researchers. So many people, not everybody wants to be an independent researcher. Some people want to learn all the research techniques, but then they want to be able to help others and be involved in the research environment. So what kind of innovation can you, put in there with respect to how you're going to get these trainees to stay there and help the institution. So think about that. I can only throw out some of these ideas. You have to think about how you can make it sound innovative. Although, like I said, if you don't have it, it's not going to be a big issue, but I'm pretty sure you can all say what your innovation is going to be, how you're going to sustain this, etc. Approach is going to be a key. The approach is going to be how you are going to do the training. First of all, who are you going to train? Do you already have an office that you want to enhance the functions, right? So how are you going to do the training? What kind of training do you think they need? And so you can write out all those things because you already identified what the needs are, right? So to be able to write that in the approach section would be to capture all of these areas. So approach is usually how you're going to do it. What would be the training? Are you going to send the trainees out somewhere because you don't have the facilities or you don't have the right environment or people or the trainers in here? So are you going to send them out somewhere to get that training? Are you going to get your collaborators? And usually it's the US. We are not talking about other high-income countries. Are you going to then bring let's say an NIH office or people from your university with whom you're working? Are those research administrators who are supposedly have a little bit more insight? Are you going to bring them to your institution and the LMIC and train more people? Are you going to get just 2 people to go to the US and learn from research administrators there and come back and teach others to, like train the trainer model? What is going to be your mechanism? That's the kind of thing you have to write. And what are you going to train them in? At the end of this program, what would that your infrastructure office look like? So that's where the evaluation comes in. How are you going to evaluate the success of your program? What would be your measures to say that I have succeeded in this grant and this is what I have done? Some of those things could be like, I have reached out to so many other institutions, right? and we have helped them, or we have brought in research administrators or whatever other infrastructure development is needed. We have brought them in to our training programs, and we've been able to help them, etc. So those would be your measures of success. And so you should have an evaluation plan in there that at the end of the 3 years, this is how we are going to say we've been successful. So that needs to be there. And when you write your final outcomes report, those are the ones that will have such information. And that is important because it's important for the NIH to know, and for the program officers and our, in this case, FIC, to know, how have we done with this program? We put in so much money over so many years. What have we gotten out of it? Has the infrastructure, for all these different areas been developed? And how have they measured it, etc. And we just had a presentation and an analysis of all this. I believe the last advisory board meeting, we presented this to our advisory board members and asked them, gave them an update on our program since 2012, asked them for suggestions, asked them, what more needs to be done, etc. It was a public meeting. We had 2 of our successful, we've had a few more, but we invited 2 of those that were available to come and present. And I'll just tell you that we have the results of that, or we have an interview that was conducted with them by our communications team, and it's up on our Fogarty website, and you can read. But before I go there, let me tell you that the environment is going to be that you get buy-in from your institution, from your dean's office, from your whoever is your research administration office that's going to help you with doing this. Maybe the vice chancellor, maybe a bunch of institutions that are coming together to learn, to set up in their own institutions, from all of them, all your collaborating institutions. We need that letter of support. We want to make sure it's there, and make sure that it is something that is meant. You just don't want to put in a form letter in there. And sometimes, we can read through it and say, oh, this is just there. They think that we are going to be fooled by it, but we won't be, right? We know a lot of what goes on because we have many grantees from many different institutions. So make sure that it's a true letter, seriously meant, and that you get that interest, that environment there that is supportive of this and continuing this program. Then I think the application itself, this probably is my last one to say how you should write it. I always say that you should look at first of all, read the FOA. Make sure that you understand the overall, reasons behind why we started doing this. But the most important things to think about are this application. I think it's sections 4 and 5. One of them talks about what you need to do to have what you need in that application. It sets out very clearly all of the different areas for significance. What are some of the things you should put in there for the investigator? What are the things you need to put in there? But before you get to filling that out, go to section 5, which is all about the review criteria, and see how we have structured it to inform the reviewers, to guide the reviewers on what it is that program is looking for. What are they going to be reviewing in your application? We have told them what they need to be looking for, specifically in some cases. And if you look at that and you know that the reviewers are they don't have much time, so they're going to just look at their review criteria and then start looking for those things. But I've also tied it up, and we do that, all of us program officers do that. We tie it along with the application materials, what you need to write. So if you look at the review criteria and then you go back and look at the application guidelines, what needs to be there, you pretty much have gotten a good grant together. You've given the NIH and the reviewers what they need to look at. And if you just focus on that, don't worry about all your other thoughts. Don't worry about all your English language and how well you write, etc. None of those things matter. What matters is the bullet points in which you think, right? That you need this, you need this, you need this, and this is how you're going to get such and such and such. And just make it be, relevant to the review section, as well as to then how you write that section. So this on this slide, that's what it's actually telling you is how to write it. And I'm going to not go more into this. And then remember how you're going to sustain it. And oftentimes I would say the sustainability part and how you're going to continue this is important, but oftentimes it's not in your hands, right? But you want to make sure that you provide all of the information, and it can, after that, what happens is not in your hands, but you should at least say you've thought about it. And these are some of the ways in which we think the institute can sustain it. How you're going to evaluate, the evaluation plan is important. I've already gone over that. So these are the links on the Fogarty website. You can just go into the fic.nih.gov and you will see that we've talked about the two programs that really did well. One was to develop the research ethics environment, IRB reviews, etc. The other one was setting up research administration offices in Nigeria. The first one was in the DRC, and how they have extended it from just their particular institutions to other institutions, and now they're expanding through bridging collaborations in country. So I think that is my last slide. Oh, budget. Budget is very clear. It's a 3-year grant, and you have about $100,000, which we think is quite enough to do a training program. There are certain things, if Vicky is there, she might want to expand on it in a little bit. But it's mostly, it's mostly travel and the training. And so the travel has to be related to the training program and for the trainees. It is not meant for PIs to start, wandering the world. And this money is not meant for them. You can't go to meetings with this money unless it's a trainee wanting to go there and wanting to go to a meeting to learn specific, that particular infrastructure. So we usually look at that. If you're working on developing a biostatistics office and you say you want going to a research administration office, we're going to say why, right? So you want to make sure that all of those things jive. So that mostly it's the travel in terms of, the other support that you need, buying laptops and buying small items to continue the work. All of those things are allowed. So I'm not getting into the detail. You can ask me specific questions about that. That's all about the budget. And this email address here, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, please use that email address that is provided here to send it to us. This way, at least we don't, if it comes into my inbox, I may miss a few things. So please send it to that email address. Jane will always be there to help answer any general questions and then direct it to me if she couldn't handle them. And Vicky is our grants management person, and she is also available if you have any specific grants management type questions, budget questions, etc. So with that, I think I am going to end. You all already know me. That is it. Let's stop share. Let me just ask if Vicky wanted to say something. If she's here, I don't know if she joined, but.
Gita, it's Craig Cohen. Do you mind if I just weigh in? Because I have another call at
Sure.
the hour.
No problem.
So thank you so much for the presentation. It's a really terrific program. UCSF had a G-11 grant with Kemry a number of years back, and it really helped Kemry to establish a very well-functioning grants office. Mm-hmm. So last week, as you may know, I was at a grant writing workshop with Maseno University, which included leadership of Maseno University, which is based in Western Kenya. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of interest in the G-11 program and applying for a G-11 grant.
Yep.
Question is around eligibility. So in the RFA, it states substantial HIV research.
Yep.
So in this case, because essentially Maseno needs to develop or wants to develop a grants office or grantsmanship office, UCSF would be the prime with a sub to Maseno. So when we look at substantial HIV research, are you or the peer reviewers, are they going to be saying, oh, Maseno, the main research grant they have for HIV research is our D43 grant and the supplements we've gotten, which you're aware of. There's aspirations for additional grants, but they don't currently have them as a prime. Right. So how are you looking at that?
So how am I looking at that? So, I don't know if you were there in the beginning when I said that, you know, this HIV crept in there because we were using HIV money from those A-trip days, and that's how it's been continuing. And then when I came and took over and I had to renew this just once, I did not change anything or define the substantial in any particular way, because there was always money for HIV research. It may not be NIH grants. There's people are doing HIV research with funding from, you know, Gates Foundation, from the European Union, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always some HIV research going on. So we never really went in there and started defining the substantial. However, like if you say that the only one that you have right now is your HIV training grant there, but you know, there's hopes that you can do more. We may ask you to come back and talk about some of the other HIV research that's going on there. Or do you have a collaboration with other institutions that are you know, close by that would benefit from this? So this is something that since we did not give the reviewers any specific guidelines on how to determine what is substantial, we usually bring it in-house after the reviews are done, and then talk to the PIs talk to the applicant to see how this would be helpful, and something we handle at program level at this point. But it would be nice to see if you can include other grants, other HIV researchers there, how many people are doing HIV research there, and so on. You know, the trainees themselves are doing many, right? And so therefore you do have some local mentors who may be doing that. So things, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, historically, our collaboration's been with KEMRI. We have a lot of, collectively, there's a lot of HIV research going on in the region. Maseno, we've gotten involved just
because you want to develop
the application, and the D43 is now allowing it to expand, but it's going to take time.
Right. But that's exactly what, you know, we're also looking to see how we can expand this to other institutions that can get started. So it's a question of how you write it. It's a grantsmanship thing.
Okay.
How do you write it in there? And you know, you've been a reviewer, you know what reviewers get.
I know.
Yeah. So figure out a way to get that message across.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, it's open for questions unless Vicky wants to say something, but it'll probably come up in questions. Okay, questions. And Jane will be monitoring.
If you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll call your name. Mwangi, do you have Emily?
Yeah, hi. I was wondering if one grant award can support infrastructure development at more than one institution. If, for example, you have a academic research institution that collaborates with an NGO, is it possible for their infrastructure training to be sort of implemented simultaneously?
So I understood the way you asked the question first time. Can one grant support infrastructure development in multiple institutions, right?
Yes.
And that would be okay. It would then just fall on your plate to say how you are going to be able to coordinate all of that training if they are too far apart.
Okay.
How are you going to bring them together? It's more a practical, you know, how are you going to deal with it practically? I think it's just that. Definitely, if you can bring these institutions together because you're already collaborating with them and they all need the same sort of a training, you could have it in one central place. These days, we are doing so many things by Zoom. Maybe you can talk about how you are going to be able to do that and so on. So yes, it's possible, but you just have to make it believable.
Okay, great.
Right?
Thank you.
Get it? Yeah.
Yes, Mwangi.
Yeah.
Thank you that's a lot of information.
I am not able to hear you very well. Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, you said you require collaboration for this kind of grant with a U.S. institution. How do you go about
say that? Sorry, I didn't get that. Say that again.
you've insisted or mentioned that for this kind of grant, you require collaboration with a U.S. institution. So how do you approach that? If, for example, you are looking for new collaborations, for you to be able to apply these particular grants.
How do you look for those collaborations with the
Yes, how do you
US?
go about that?
So usually what happens is the people, when they apply, they're already collaborating with a US institution. I remember I also told you that you can be collaborating with an LMIC institution, another institution. And so if your institution needs to develop that infrastructure, then you can approach another institution at the LMIC in the LMIC country where you are to see if they have a good program that they can then share with you. So together you write the grant, and it would be that collaboration between an LMIC institution. If you don't know anybody, then we need to talk about who in the near vicinity of where you are has some research going on who can then work with you. I'm pretty sure that if you are a researcher, you already know some other researchers. You already have a couple of other grants that you can then combine with, approach those institutions, and then together you could write one if they don't have a good infrastructure development grant. It's a question of coming together with people that you already know. If I try to find you somebody, then it will be something that you will have to talk to them on your own, and then see whether they want to invest the time and effort. If they're not into this kind of mental makeup of wanting to develop capacity in LMICs, maybe that US investigator isn't going to be helpful, but maybe there are others. So what you do is, and if you send me an email, I'll send you some information. You can go into the NIH Reporter, which is a searchable database, which tells you which gives you information on all the other researchers in the various different countries. You can search by country, you can search by institution, you can identify some people, set up your own interactions with them to see if they would be helpful, etc. There are many ways you can do this, but it's a question of trying to somehow find a person who is going to be your friend who says, okay, I'll help you, and then you can work on it together. So this would require some pre-preparation, and send me an email and I'll see what I can help you with and how to go about doing that. It's doable, but it's not as straightforward. Did that help you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Which country are you from?
Kenya.
Kenya. Kenya has a lot. What university in Kenya?
No, I'm in Cambridge. I know there are some collaborators around, but my question was...
Yeah, they have a good G-11 right now. They're setting it up at the University of Nairobi. You can, let me know. I'll put you in touch with some of them to be able to do it. But again, it depends on what area. If you don't have anything for, let's say, information communication technology, or setting up a library which is going to teach trainees and researchers on how to do literature searches and how do you do scoping reviews or whatever, it's the library setup that needs to be done. Maybe you don't have one like that and you want to apply for that. That is going to be up to, working with the librarian. So many different ways to do it. So just let me know what exactly you want and I'll try to help you. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Next.
Ariana?
Hi, so you mentioned the PI should have some knowledge of the infrastructure need area. Could the PI from the applicant institution be an expert in HIV research, and then their collaborator be an expert in the infrastructure need area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So as long as the team together, again, for this round, for this, for the next however many rounds we have of this particular G11, the NOFO or the FOA, we have put in the HIV need, and therefore you're going to have to look for an HIV person or an HIV research going on. It may change, when I do this all over again, a renewal. But basically, you don't have, the research isn't going to come in there because this is not a research grant, but an HIV researcher knows what the HIV community needs, right? And so you could get that, but then you don't have the expertise in that particular infrastructure area. Get a collaborator who can then design the actual programs. You, as the HIV researcher, will say, overall, this is what I need. But this person with the actual expertise is going to be able to design the program, the training program, what needs to be done, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I also wanted to ask, you mentioned you're prioritizing things that are scored well. Is there like a pay line or a range in mind when you say well?
We don't have pay lines. We strictly go by the scores and the amount of money we have and how we can distribute the money that we have. And I can tell you, Fogarty really doesn't have a whole lot of money. The HIV programs are expanding, from others. So we struggle sometimes. But if it is, I don't know, how do I tell you what is a good score? I mean, if you're in the 20s, it's obviously good scoring. If you're in the 30s, maybe middle level. If you're in the 40s, forget it. 50s, totally forget it. It's something that is, a little bit softer, but there is still a hard, soft, decision-making role. It's mostly going to be the money, getting the money. And also whether that infrastructure, so once the review is done, you get your scores and everything is fine. Even if you get a score of 20, and then it looks like you're just doing it for your own little grant and you're not really expanding it to the institution, then programmatically we can say, well, this other one that got a lesser score or a higher number is going to be able to do, is really struggling or is really going to work towards the institution's capacity, and maybe we will help them more than the one that says, I'm going to help myself. You get it? So it's how you write it and how you can convince everybody that you're really developing it, and you're going to share it with everybody else. Right now it's PIs that are applying. Yeah. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Next is Lillian.
Thank you very much. I am Lillian from Kenya, University of Nairobi. And I am aware that there's a G-11 already. And I was just wondering, is it okay if we make another application addressing a totally different area?
Yes, a totally different area, even if you're at the same institution, is okay.
All right, thank you.
But
and
remember, again, that totally different area can't just, you're doing an implementation science project, training in implementation science. You can't just say, I'm going to set up an implementation science, office or something like that, right? It needs to be something that everybody will use.
All right.
You want to make sure that you're not doing it for yourself, but it needs to have that institution buy-in. I mean, later on, I'm thinking when I renew this program, I'm probably going to say, any G-11 program needs to have a person from an office that is going to be instituting that research administration infrastructure area to be involved, not just the scientific PI. But right now, we're just going to look for, are you going to be able to make this for the whole institution?
Thank you. I have another question. You're very clear that we should have a US collaborating institution. We've been able to identify one, but would also want to work with someone to collaborate with someone from Europe because of the expertise that the person has. Is that acceptable?
So it is acceptable. They just cannot get any money. They can be collaborators. The question is going to be, what do you need them for? So when I said US collaborators, it's not necessary that you have US collaborators. You could be collaborating with an LMIC institution that has the expertise or the wherewithals and have established a successful, infrastructure in that area. You could use them to be able to work with you and then help train you. right? So it can be an LMIC collaboration. It could be a US LMIC collaboration. The other upper income countries are there only to provide the training ground. So let's say if it is research, here's a crude example. If it is going to be to learn how to use the research, set up a research administration office to be able to handle NIH grants, well, I would say, what's that upper income country going to do with that? Because they're not NIH. They're not going to know about the US system. So what are they going to train you in? However, if you say that is to go and learn some technology that you want to set up, right, for your institution, like, give me any kind of a research technique that is very specialized and it's only available in that other country, you can send people there to get trained and come back. But then you get trained in a system that you're not going to be able to have in your own institution. What good would that training be, right? Are you going to be able to buy that instrumentation that may be, something that is beyond the institute's budget? Where are you going to get it from? So how is that training going to help you? So these are the kinds of things to think about when you write it, because that's how you convince people why you need to send people out for what purpose. I don't know if that makes it a little clear, example-wise.
It does make it clear, but maybe later on I'll get to you for more
With
clarification.
specifics, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's difficult to answer a question without the specifics, yeah.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. Ezewa?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation so far. It's been very helpful. I just want to ask a question. Assuming you already have an arrangement where you've identified a US collaborator and you're trying to build a training program that will strengthen the capacity of the institution to do research in HIV and perhaps in other areas. But you've also identified a gap in some of the specific areas of training need that is neither existent in the LMIC institution or in the US collaboration institution. But you have identified perhaps resource people in Europe who are willing to contribute to that training. I just want to find out how is that going to be looked at? Say, for example, you want to involve them to deliver specific training modules for which they have the criteria, and obviously which will build the capacity of the institution in terms of the research they are trying to do. So that's number one. My question is, is that the kind of thing that you could capture under the approach section? And overall, how would that look on the application? That's first question. The second one is...
Yeah, wait. So the first question. So yes, you would capture that in the approach section. That's fine. You are, like the previous question that was asked was very similar. You can have others if you want to go to you think that's the only place where that training is available, and you do it, but you want to make sure that you're sending them to a training to another upper income country that's not US. Why is it not available in the US? You think about that, but then what will you then have that facility available in your country? Because what we are trying to do is to set up that infrastructure there in your institutions. But if you say that this upper income country where you're going to send people for training is going to be always available to all of the researchers that are there who want to work in this area, you made that connection so they can go to this country to get, maybe it's, you take your samples and get some analysis done there because that's the only place where it's available. You probably can try to make a case for it. I think there are more specifics here that we probably, as you write it and you could get into the more details one, you should probably talk to me about it, because right now I can't think of all the different waypoints. So your second question.
Yeah. Let me just go back to the first question because there's some aspect that's not clear to me. So what I'm actually looking at here is a situation where the resource person that will provide that specific training will come from that institution that is in Europe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he's just going to come and provide that training to capacitate the LMIC
Yeah.
institution, obviously with the plan that they will continue beyond that, some kind of sustainability plan. So
Yeah.
that's the first question. I think you're saying yes.
That looks reasonable. If they're coming there to train you and it's just going to be to set up your place, that's doable.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the second question, so if you have a situation whereby the gaps that you have identified to train your local staff within the LMIC also becomes useful for other institutions around because of the way the setting is, can that potentially be captured in when you do this kind of application? So it's just not just showing that it's going to help capacitate your institution, but also just broaden the research capacity around for anyone that may want to eventually come into HIV research field.
And that's exactly what we want to see. We want to build that network.
Oh,
so that that area gets, that capacity and opens up chances for others to do research in that area, so that the research environment as well as the research itself, helps the country, because hopefully that research is important to your country.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Jane, I can't hear.
Bernard Gulia has a question in the chat. He said, can one institution which has identified more than one need submit 2 grant proposals?
Yeah, I think we went over that 2 or 3 times. Yes, you can, but they have to be in different areas. They cannot be very similar. They have to be distinct.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Hello?
Yes. Go ahead.
I haven't been able to raise my hand.
Okay, go ahead, ask. Who was that, Jane?
Sylvanus.
Yeah, just a little questions.
Uh-huh.
I'm from San Pedro. We can have the list of those who can.
What did you say? I didn't get it.
Yeah, just I said just a little question. How do we get in touch with those who are? How do we get in touch with the list of those who can help us here in Cameroon? Those with whom we can get in contact. So we'll talk about the capacity building, infrastructure capacity building.
So first identify what it is that you want to build, right? And then you probably, what institution are you talking about? Where are you from?
As I earlier said, this is Saint Pasteur, Cameroon.
Cameroon, yeah.
Saint Pasteur, yeah, from Cameroon.
So that's something that, we were at the interest meeting last week, and many Cameroonians were there, and we were trying to figure out how to help. Maybe we can have a discussion later on how to identify people. I think there are many in the African region that can help you set it up, because there are many collaborations going on between investigators in Cameroon and other parts of Africa, as well as in the US. So what we need to do is to find out what it is that you're doing or your institution is doing, and then see who your collaborators are, and then get you all together to talk about what, how they can help set up a training program for infrastructure development. So would you, email to that address or email me? Jane, I think we will be able to share these slides with you by the end of this week, if not earlier. We just need to find out the compliance issues that we need to talk to our communications office first to make sure that it's okay. And when you get it, you can go through all the things that I've just said, as well as the email addresses and the links are there. And you can, if you email me, I'll help you identify something, some help.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Make sure you email.
Okay,
I mean,
thank you very much.
we do want to help those that need it. So make sure you email and keep in touch. And that goes for any one of you that's listening. We want you to make sure that you avail of this, and also any feedback you can get. You know, this whole thing about how to identify collaborators.
I'll do it immediately as a meeting.
Pardon?
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Okay. Any other? So, if there are no other questions,
Hello?
Sorry, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Dennis Mukwana from Kenya, Maseno University. So, can you allow also somebody to work with opportunistic pathogens in HIV? Because I'm a parasitologist and I'm willing to work with HIV. So, can I also bring my expertise of parasitology, because given that we have opportunistic parasitic infections in HIV, is that relevant?
So this is not a research or a research training grant program we are talking about. We are talking about developing the infrastructure. We are talking about developing an institutional capacity. For example, a research administration office or an office where you want to have biostatistics done or bioinformatics done, or an lab instrumentation facility or things like that. This is not for you to do research. That's a different kind of a training program that you should, I can give you the program officer. Her name is Barbara Sina, who deals with the infectious diseases training program. And that's purely for research training. That's totally different from what we are talking about here. So if you go into the Fogarty website and look under programs and look at all of the different programs that are outlined, there is one for infectious diseases, global infectious diseases. I think you're talking about a program like that, right?
Yes, that's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's called a D43 program. And you look under global infectious diseases, look under Dr. Barbara Sina, S-I-N-A, and you will get more information because she runs that program. That's purely a research and research training program.
Thank you.
Okay. No other? So with, I don't have anything more to say. I think it's going to be up to you all to then digest, listen to this again, digest, the information you've gotten. You have more questions come up as you are writing. If you're planning to write, feel free to use that email address and jot your questions down. No question is silly or are not important. They're all important. I will try my best to answer them, and I'll try my best to guide you through this whole process in how to think about doing this. There was some other question. A hand was raised. Jane?
No, there's no hand.
No hand. Are there any more questions in chat? Are we done?
Yeah, I have a question. I was wondering if this presentation can be shared out.
She will be sending, yes, Jane will be
Oh.
sending out Jane, can you go ahead and let them know what you're going to share?
I have to check with
Okay.
communications first, but we're hoping to share the recordings and the presentations with everyone in the next week or so.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we done, Jane?
I don't see any more questions.
Okay. Okay, then, if there are no more questions, I hope this has been helpful. Maybe it raised more questions, more, you need more clarity. Feel free to email that to that email box, and we'll get back to you. Or you can always otherwise email me too. If you're really writing an application and you need immediate assistance, I can help you with that. All right, then. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks and bye.